enthusiasts, how are you doing? Welcome back. I hope you're well and I hope you're having a great day. In today's video we're back on the Super City and I am going to be fitting an AEM Electronics Wideband Air Fuel Ratio Gauge. Now you might be wondering why. If you've got a tuned car or a tuned Mini, it's really important that you get the fuel mixture correct, and a wideband air fuel ratio gauge lets you do that, or lets you view the lambda, the oxygen sensor and the air fuel ratio while you're driving the car, so while you're using it. It is a really useful tool. And obviously the Super City has already been upgraded with a stage 1 kit, and I've got plans to fit a supercharger on it in future, so this is going to come in really handy. The air fuel ratio gauge I've gone is made by AEM Electronics. It's not the cheapest, there are cheaper ones out there, but I would warn against that because you're not going to be getting as good a quality sensor and as good a quality gauge. Actually, for the Mini itself, the AEM gauge is probably a bit more than I would need, but it's like a tool. It won't necessarily be staying in that car. I might use it on PL. I might also use it on the TVR in future. It has some features that means it can connect via CAN wires into the ECU, and it can do more clever stuff than a carburetted Mini has got on it. But the very important feature of the AEM gauges are the sensors themselves. So AEM supply them with an FEM sensor, which they say is really quick reacting, really robust and really reliable. But really the proven sensors out there are the Bosch LSU 4.9 sensors. They're very easy to get hold of. They're relatively cost effective. The great thing about the AEM gauge is it accepts both. If you plug a Bosch sensor into it, it will automatically recognise that it's a Bosch LSU 4.9, or it'll work just as well with the FEM sensor that it comes with. Apologies just before we get into the video, so I need to correct myself. I've just watched it back and I'm just doing the editing, and I call the UEGO sensor, which is what it's properly called, all sorts of things. I call it an O2 sensor, an oxygen sensor and a lambda sensor. In essence, it is all the same thing. The UEGO sensor senses the oxygen content in the exhaust, and it uses that reading to calculate the lambda, the O2 content and the air fuel ratio, and displays that on the gauge. So apologies in advance if it's a little bit confusing, but it is commonly known as a UEGO sensor. So what's in the box? First off, a little Easter egg. If you open the box upside down, there's a cheeky little picture. I believe this is the guy that started the company. So yeah, just a nice little Easter egg there. So let's get the box open. There you go. So first off, we have our air fuel ratio gauge. And as you can see, it is a really narrow gauge, 52mm mounting, so pretty standard, and very shallow. So very, it's not too obtrusive inside the car. This now looks a little bit confusing, but trust me, it is very simple. There's nothing to worry about here at all. So first off, we get a wiring pack containing the connector that goes to it's called a UEGO sensor, HEGO sensor, however you want to pronounce it. That's the sensor that goes in the exhaust. So we've got a multi-plug onto the gauge, and then one plug which goes onto the sensor itself. We then have the power wires. So again, multi-plug into the gauge. And don't worry, there looks like lots of wires here. Actually, for the fitment on a Mini, all we need is an ignition controlled live and an earth. All these other wires here, so these are CAN wires to go into a CAN network, and also for like data loggers or to go into an ECU. So when you've got an ECU controlled fuel ratio, this can actually integrate with the ECU and work with the ECU that's on the car if you've got that compatibility. So that's a nice little feature. We then get our oxygen sensor itself, This is an FEM unit, but like I say, if this fails, you can just buy a Bosch LSU 4.9 and connect it up. You then get a bung, which needs welding into the exhaust, which is the first job we need to do in a moment. So it's a steel bung, threaded, that needs to go into the exhaust system. A few bullet connectors. And then finally, you don't actually get any instructions. You have to scan the QR code and you download them off the internet. I hate reading things off phones and that sort of thing, so I've downloaded that and I've printed the instructions out. And you get the obligatory sticker. I mean, that straight away, that's going to add 5 brake horsepower. So what do we need to do next? So the first thing we need to do is install the sensor into the exhaust itself. It needs to go about 18 inches downstream of the cylinder head, which is right in the bottom of like the LCB or downpipe on a Mini. I actually want to fit it in the first part of the exhaust, because if you fit it after any connections, there's risks of getting air leaks, and the sensor is better off being closer to the engine than further away, but it needs not to be too close. You can't fit it right up by the head. So we need to get it up, jacked up. I'm probably going to take the inlet manifold off and the full exhaust system. Right, so there's the rear part of the exhaust off. I could potentially fit it in this bit here, close to the front, but I'm just worried about if you get a bit of an air leak in here, and it's get a Venturi effect. If it takes any air in there, that's going to affect the reading. So I'd rather have it straight into the front pipe. Easy to get off. It pretty much fell off because the rear hangers, the cotton reels are knackered on them, so I need to replace them. Next up, air filter off, inlet manifold off, and the exhaust manifold can come off then, and then I can have a go at welding the bung in. Right, bit of a faff, but carb off, inlet manifold off, and we got our exhaust manifold off. It's a 3-into-1 this, rather than a long centre branch, which actually makes it better because there's more room down the bottom here. So I marked on there with a chalk pen where that lambda sensor needs to go. So we're going to centre punch that now and then drill it, and we'll get it ready for welding. As you can see, the exhaust join comes up to about here. So we've got, you'll see on the car, that's like an ideal location for it. So let's get drilling. Right, so that's our hole. There's our bung. Now, important bit, we don't want to put it in at 90 degrees. It needs to have a bit of an angle on it. They recommend about 10 degrees. So before we weld that in, we'll just tilt it over. It's got a shoulder on it. Obviously, it's going to leave a bit of a gap at the bottom, but that's fine. We'll weld that up. Right, so there we go. It's on. The welding is not the best. It's what I'd call functional. You need to make sure there are no gaps, pinholes or anything like that in your welding. So a few places I just went over again. The only other thing to consider is this bracket here. That's now a bit of a pain to get on because you've got the lambda O2 sensor in the way, so you have to squeeze it over that, which is a bit of a pain, but nothing too bad. And now all we've got to do is just get it back on the car, put it back together. And we'll put the sensor in once it's on the car. And my plan is to run the wiring for the sensor up the back of the subframe. Right then, the exhaust is back on and the lambda sensor's screwed in now. So as you can see, it's almost tailor-made for it. There's a hole there for the wiring to go through. That goes up behind the steering rack. And then I've run it on this side of the engine. So obviously we want to avoid the hot exhaust with the wires. We want to keep the plug out of any water because it's not waterproof, it's only splash proof. And the reason I mentioned earlier, the reason we're angling the sensor up at 10 degrees is just to stop any condensation forming on the bottom of it. So you want it at a bit of an angle, and that is pretty much perfect. I'll just show you on top. So up here we've actually got the sensor plug just there by the engine mounting. So I'll cable tie that up in a moment. Obviously I'll get it off the ramps now, and then we've got to do the bit on the inside with the gauge. So I need to run the loom through the bulkhead. Right, so these are the two looms we now need to run. We've got the connector for the O2 sensor, and really long, so obviously it gives you lots spare. That plugs into the instrument display. Same again, we've got that plugging into the instrument display. There's our power cables. Like I said, we only actually need red and black, which will come through the bulkhead, and I'm going to wire them in direct to the fuse box, so they're fused as well. So I want the gauge on this side, so I've just taken everything out here. You can see where the washer pipe comes through there. So we're going to need to drill a hole in the bulkhead here, and big enough to get that plug through, and then we'll put them through with a grommet. Right, that's our grommet. Our wiring run neatly through now. So we've got enough to get to the fuse box and to get down to the lambda sensor. And then inside you can see the rubber grommet, and we can hide all that excess wiring behind here now. Right then, that's the installation pretty much done. So we're all done, wired up under the bonnet here now. You can't really see the wiring. Power wiring's across the top there, and the lambda sensor plug is down here. It's now cable tied on. So that's all good. Inside, I haven't mounted the gauge yet. I need to find a bracket to mount it to, so it's just sat there. But there you go. It recognises it's an FAE sensor. If you put a Bosch one in there, it recognises the Bosch as well. And then obviously it goes through a heat cycle to warm up to begin with, and then it will start giving a reading. But I'll once I've mounted that up, I'll take you for a ride and see what it does. Right then, there's our discreet little AFR gauge all mounted up. Should be able to see that when I'm driving. Yeah, that should be fine actually. Right then, let's go and take the Super City for a drive, and we'll watch their air fuel ratio gauge and we'll see what's going on. Now I think there's a problem with it running too lean, because when I drove it back, obviously it was a good sort of 160, 170 miles down the motorway, absolutely fine. But I've noticed driving it around recently that when I quickly accelerate, it starts to stutter and misfire. It feels like it's like a lean cut to me, like it's running too lean. So we'll take it for a drive and we'll see what's going on. That's the whole point of having an air fuel ratio gauge, is you're able to see what the mixture's doing under all different driving conditions. So we are going to have to do a few miles to let it warm up. It's still on choke at the moment, so still running very rich, sort of 10.5 to 1. But as soon as we can, we'll start getting rid of the choke. You really only want to use as much choke as you need. Try and get it back in as quickly as possible, because it's really over fueling the engine on choke. So while we're cruising along, it actually seems to be okay. We're sort of 14.7. Yeah, between 14 and 15 to 1, which is around about right. So cruising along, we're pretty much spot on. But I'll show you the problem. If I change down now and accelerate, change gear, the air fuel ratio goes right off the chart. In fact, it stops reading. If I back off, accelerate, it's going up above more than 28 to 1, which is unreadable. It's very, very lean, and it misfires just basically because there's not enough fuel and there's way too much air. So again, we're accelerating now, so we're running at about 13.5 to 1, which is probably about right. Change gear, and then the air fuel ratio went off 24 to 1 again. Cruising along, 14.5, 14.6 to 1. Accelerate, we get a bit of a misfire, went up to 28 to 1 again. Misfire. So what's causing that? I've had a bit of a think about it, and as you're driving it, if you accelerate gently and you're cruising and that sort of thing, the fuel mixture seems fine. The air fuel ratio sitting around sort of 14.5, 14.7 to 1. No surprise that AC Dodge tuned it. But what's causing it to lean cut like that and run really lean? Well, I think it's the dashpot. The piston is rising way too fast, and what happens there, particularly at lower RPMs, is you don't have enough air velocity going through the carburetor. You get less of a Venturi effect, so the dashpot rises really, really quickly. The needle is right out of the jet, so you would think it would be dumping in loads of fuel, but there's no vacuum there, so all it's doing is just introducing loads and loads of air, not enough fuel, and that's why you get that lean cut. So how do we stop the piston moving up so fast? Well, it's either the spring or the oil that's in there that controls the rate and the speed that the dashpot rises. So we'll go back quickly, have a look and see if there's oil in the dashpot firstly, because that could be our problem. Right, we're just back to the garage, so I'll look at that dashpot oil, but I've also noticed, so at idle we're running about 10.7, 11 to 1, which is a tad, well, it's a fair bit rich actually, so we might try leaning it off a little bit as well. The only problem is it did seem to be about right at cruise speed, so by adjusting the needle, the jet on the carburetor, you adjust the mixture through the whole rev range, because you are just moving the needle up and down in the jet. So it might be that this needle needs profiling or it needs changing, so it's a bit richer at idle. But my advice would be, whenever you're making adjustments, just make a note of what adjustments you've made and do a little bit at a time. So we'll probably do maybe 2 flats on the jet, so turn it 2 flats to richen it up a bit at idle. We'll take it for a drive and see what it's like. So, but first off, let's put some dashpot oil in there, go out for a ride again and see what it's like. Right, let's have a look. Yeah, straight away there is barely any oil in that dashpot. So yeah, it's just the piston will be just rising far too fast, and it only does it momentarily, and then obviously it settles back down again. So that's why when we accelerate gently, we're getting the right air fuel ratio. Now you can use different grades of oil in the dashpot. I've got some proper SU damper oil. It's the genuine stuff. That doesn't mean it's the right stuff, so we'll see what it's like, but sometimes you need a thicker oil in the dashpot. Typically the choice after this would be something like 2050, but we'll fill this up. Now with oil in there, you'll see what happens. It doesn't just drop straight down, there's some resistance there, so that will resist the piston rising. Cool. And we're also just gonna richen it up a little bit, sorry, lean it off a little bit. It was showing around about 11 to 1 at idle, so that's a tad on the rich side. So we're gonna do sort of 2 flats leaner, and we'll see how it goes. Right, so I've adjusted the mixture. We're running around about 14 to 1 at idle, 14 and a bit to 1. So I found it takes very, very fine adjustments. I've adjusted it about 2.5, 3 flats, but yeah, you just give it a little bit, come back in, look at what the air fuel ratio gauge is doing, and just keep tweaking. Don't have to get it perfect first time. We don't have to rush. Now let's take it out for a drive and see if it's better now it's got some dashpot oil in, which I'm sure it will be. Now what I have found with it, making small tweaks and adjustments, is it tends to wander a little bit. So you'll get it set perfectly at sort of 14 and a half to 1 at idle, blip the throttle a few times and it'll be back down to like 13. Or you take it for a ride, it's all set up, and then yeah, 5 minutes later you've adjusted nothing, but it's giving you a slightly different reading. Now I think that is probably just wear in the carburetor. You know, you get small air leaks, especially around the butterfly. Yeah, I think it's probably just a bit of wear in the carburetor, so you kind of have to compromise a bit, set it up the best you can on average. I'm sure with a new carb it probably wouldn't wander like that. So let's try it again now and see whether that made any difference. So we're getting into the cruise, which we are doing now pretty much. Looking at the gauge, we're at 14.3, 14.4. Now previously if I booted it, it would lean cut and the AFR would go off the dial. Now no lean cut, picks up straight away. It did peak at about 18, 19 there, and did take a second or so to come back down. So let me just get back into the cruise and we'll try it again. So we're back cruising along again now. Again we're sitting at 14.6, 14.7, which tells me the needle's probably around about spot on in it. I'm just going to boot it. Yeah, we went 18 or 19 AFR again, so that has made a big difference actually, having some oil in the dashpot, but it still seems to be going a little bit lean when you accelerate. Yeah, we're getting about 18, 19. What we're trying next, we'll just see what the AFR gauge is doing at full throttle. So it should just be, you want it a little bit richer than stoichiometric, because obviously you're accelerating, you want the power, but you don't want it to go too rich. So yeah, we're getting about 13.8 full throttle, but we are still getting that lean cut. This is in top gear, full throttle, we're about 13.8 to 1. If I back off and we go back into the cruise, just let it settle down a bit. in the cruise, yeah, around about 14.8, 14.9, so that's pretty good to me. Now what we're going to do now is go back, so the dashpot is still rising just a little bit too fast. We want to slow it down a little bit. So this is where the experimentation comes in. I'm going to go back, I'm going to drain the dashpot of that SU oil, and I'm going to put some 2050 in it, and we'll see what that's like. What I did find interesting, I'm contradicting myself a little bit here, because I said if you adjust the mixture at idle, it adjusts it through the whole RPM range, but that doesn't seem to, although there's only sort of 2.5 flaps turned, it still seems to be pretty spot on through the rest of the rev range. But like I say, I think what's probably coming into play here is a bit of a warm carburetor. So we're back at the garage. We are going to change the dashpot oil for some 2050. Bit of a faff. We're going to have to take the air filter off, take the dashpot off, empty out the oil and refill it. Unless someone knows an easier way of draining the dashpot of oil. Well, that's going to put to pay road testing again today, isn't it? It wasn't meant to rain today. Flipping glad I chucked the roof on the Tamora. Otherwise that'd be one soggy rat at the moment. Right, I'm guessing I might be back to road test it another day when it's not raining. I don't like going out in the rain. Still raining. So it's all back together now. Dashpot's still on, or back on. I'm not going to take it out and drive it now. I thought I'd just whip out a plug and look at it. Now, I know a little bit about reading plugs, but I am by no means an expert, so what do we reckon? Centre electrode is slightly brown. I don't think in the main that looks too bad, but we are still playing around and adjusting, but it's always worth just a sense check, just to whip a plug out. If it comes out all black and sooty, you got problems. I think you can also tell something about the ignition timing by looking at the back of the electrode, but again, I'm no expert, so if you do know, let me know. Nice to share the knowledge. Right then, next day, that rain never let up yesterday, so we filled the dashpot with 2050 oil. We're going to take it for a drive, warm it up now and see what it's like with a thicker oil in there. Now I must apologise, the shots of the air fuel ratio gauge, the GoPro's doing something weird. So when it's at idle, when you're at low speed, the GoPro's picking up the LEDs okay, but when you start to drive, for some reason the GoPro won't pick them up. I don't think it's a frame rate issue, because it does work and it's picking it up when you're sort of stationary or go slow, but as soon as you start going a bit faster, it's like the gauge disappears. I actually think it might be something to do with the stabilisation, so I've turned it off and we'll see whether it works. So we just try again. We're at about 14.5, 14.6. Full throttle. Went up to maybe 16.5 and then it settled back down. We're at full throttle about 13.5. So that feels pretty good to me. I'm not sure we're going to do much better than that. Yeah, just when you very first apply full throttle, just lean for a split second, but only, that was only like 16.5, maybe 17 to 1 for a fraction of a second. I don't know. I've only just fitted the AFR gauge on the car, so I don't have any experience to sort of compare it with. So let me know what you think if you're running one in your car. It certainly feels it's a lot more responsive now when you give it full throttle. So there we go, thanks for watching. Quite a long video this week. It's a real shame I couldn't get the GoPro to record properly what was being displayed on the air fuel ratio gauge. It is really interesting. It's a fantastic tool, and yeah, I'm sure it's going to be very useful in the future. So if you enjoyed this video today, remember to give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please do help grow the channel. Consider subscribing, become part of the community. And if you want to drop me a comment, I read through all the comments. So I hope you have a great week, and I'll catch you again on the next one. Cheers.